The evidence is in. Kim Kardashian ruined Marilyn Monroe's dress. But it's just a dress? Who cares about that when there are bigger things happening in the world right now? Clearly, a lot of people do care. And here is why the happy birthday dress debacle is a much more serious issue than it might seem. The Met Gala outfits always spark discussion, but this year Kim Kardashian came in something that went beyond quirky and moved into controversial. Kim wore a one-of-a-kind dress made from materials no longer produced and that was last worn by Marilyn Monroe in 1962 when she sang Happy Birthday to President Kennedy, less than a year before they both passed away. It was like experiencing a guttural stab of pain for people involved in conservation, and also for anyone interested in fashion history or Marilyn Monroe's life. Even if we ignore all the issues that come with wearing any historical clothing, natural skin oils, movement, pulling the seams, it was still clear that Kim had some serious problems getting into the 60-year-old dress. We all saw this video of the dress being rubbed and pulled while trying to get it to fasten up. And now the dress has gone back on display at Ripley's Believe It or Not attraction, and we can finally see for certain the damage that has been done. Straps torn, seams ripped, rhinestones missing. The process of the Happy Birthday's dress degradation has been quickened unnecessarily. Now, we are at the point in all internet discussions where people start to say, what does it matter? It's just a dress worn by some rich celebrities. Its condition has no effect on my life, in which I'll never be able to afford a house. And they do have a point. We are facing some major social issues right now that feel much more pressing than any dress. But I am here to argue that if you care about today's extreme wealth disparity, then you should also care about Kim Kardashian's and everyone else's involved's decision for the dress to be worn at the Met Gala without a single thought about the inevitable destruction. Because this is all just part of the same old problem. One argument for not caring about the dress is that if it's so culturally important, then why is it in a place like Ripley's Believe It or Not? But that argument assumes that historical items naturally glide towards places and institutions where they are cared for in the ideal way according to their level of historical interest. Oh, if only that were how the world works. In case you're unfamiliar, Ripley's Believe It or Not is a franchise specializing in the peculiar and the unbelievable. It has a number of attractions including mirror mazes, wax figures, and a huge collection of real-life historical items. One of those items is Marilyn Monroe's dress, which Ripley proudly boasts is the most expensive dress in history after it bought it in 2016 for $4.8 million.
Ladies and gentlemen, this dress just sold for $4.81 million with buyer's premium. Ripley's Believe It or Not.
Since then, the dress has been the gem of its cultural history collections. Ripley's has many auditoriums, fake museums, around the world. On display are its most exciting historical items alongside a few gimmicks like a building that looks like it's sinking. None of these auditoriums has museum accreditation, which would mean they would have to follow proper museum practices about storage, conservation, acquisition, interpretation, so on. As a privately owned company, Ripley's can do whatever the heck it wants with its historical collections. They kind of make me think of the modern-day equivalent of the 18th century curiosity cabinets, or 19th century freak shows and circuses, where people would collect things that look strange and put them on display, saying anything about it to get people through the door with a paid ticket. People loved Marilyn Monroe. Even today, she's an instantly recognizable figure, and she's an icon of mid-20th century glamour. Of course Ripley's wants her most interesting possessions to show to its visitors, and that's why they were willing to pay up extortionate auction prices to secure the dress. Do you think real museums can keep up with those prices? As teenagers, the Bronte sisters wrote a series of short stories in little books, imitating publication conventions at the time and using minuscule handwriting. These little books give valuable insight into their childhood as well as the progression of their writing skills. It would make sense that the little books should be kept in a museum, particularly one with a connection to the sisters, like the Bronte Parsonage Museum, their childhood home. And yet it has been a struggle for the Bronte Museum to get their hands on the books. In 2019, they raised nearly £90,000 to help purchase one little book at an auction in Paris, after they had been outbid at another auction 8 years earlier. Just recently, the Bronte Museum acquired the last of the books, which hadn't been seen since an auction in 1916. It was bought for $1.25 million by the Friends of the National Libraries, who aimed to save written and print history, and then it was donated to the museum by them. The Bronte Museum has had to fight against the odds to get the little books into their collection so they can be studied and appreciated by Bronte scholars and enthusiasts. They've had to rely on public donations and external organisations to get the books. If that support wasn't there, then the books wouldn't be in the Bronte Museum. And if a private collector or a private company decided they really wanted to have Bronte's little books, then there would be nothing to stop them dropping an extreme amount of money to get them. The Met Gala itself is there to raise money for the Met Museum, specifically its Costuming Institute. Conservation is expensive and they need to get all the money from somewhere, especially when some parts of history are still considered more worthy of funding than others. And so when a Met Gala guest turns up wearing an iconic historical dress as a publicity stunt, and when the private company that owns the dress doesn't care about the inevitable damage, it's a massive punch for all the people who organise the gala with the aim to raise money to conserve historical dress. So basically what we learn is that historic items don't always end up in the museums where they seem like they should belong. And smaller museums and historic sites especially have trouble getting hold of things that appear essential for their collection. Instead, a lot of the time it comes down to who has the biggest bucket of money to drop on the historic objects. And then, once the object is in private hands, they can and will do whatever they want with it. A lot of private collectors are respectful towards their belongings of historic value, but not all of them. Do we really want to live in a world where the rich get to decide whether historic objects are preserved into the future? The next criticism is that the happy birthday dress doesn't matter because there are real problems to worry about. First of all, if we can't go onto Twitter to talk about things happening in our interests and hobbies, then what even is the point of it existing? Second, someone might just see a dress, there are millions of them, while irreplaceable lives are falling apart. But it's part of the bigger picture of people in positions of privilege not being considerate towards heritage, leading to it not being preserved for everyone else to appreciate. There was the recent viral video where someone smashed an allegedly ancient piece of pottery. This hit a nerve, and people commented on how the video was disrespectful towards the culture and the history of the place where the pot was apparently from. Whether the pot was real or a replica, this highlights how everyday objects from the past hold important connections to people from the past. Seeing the artifacts carelessly destroyed is upsetting because it is a reminder that we have lost information about how the people from the past lived. Simply because some people don't respect those people enough to take care of their artifacts. By the way Ripley's are publicly handling the situation, you can tell that they, at best, don't know anything about conservation, and at worst are liking all the extra publicity. Their vice president of publishing and licensing asserts that Kim did not in any way damage the garment in the short amount of time it was worn at the Met Gala. It's kind of revealing that they get their publishing and licensing team to make the statement instead of their conservation experts who were apparently present at the time. The language in the official statement also makes it seem like just another social media debate. They caused quite the stir, their actions were hotly contested, and that our mission is to both entertain and educate visitors and fans, and sparking conversations like the discourse around Marilyn Monroe's dress does just that, no matter which side of the debate you are on. It really seems like they're enjoying this. And then there is the way Ripley's is bringing up a condition report from 2017 in a way that apparently proves that the dress was damaged before Kim wore it. Even though Marilyn fans have shared countless videos and pictures of the dress's condition from between the 2016 auction right up until a few months before the Met Gala, the damage only appears after it was worn. And if we accept for a few seconds that these pictures might be misleading, then if the 2017 condition report said the dress is very fragile and already had some straining around the seams, then why risk damaging it further? Kim Kardashian wearing Marilyn Monroe's dress is part of the same societal problem where the rich can buy their way into doing anything they want with heritage that should belong to everyone. It's the carelessness of thinking that you can do anything with your money without needing to concern yourself with the effect on everyone else. Does that attitude sound like it can be applied to other situations? The dress is a smaller piece in the big puzzle of bad, but it's still a piece. And finally, there is the stance that it's just a dress worn by some rich celebrities who live and have lived lives so out of touch with us that there's no point caring about it. By wearing the dress, Kim Kardashian is trying to draw comparisons between herself and Marilyn Monroe as cultural icons who set fashion trends and body standards. However, Marilyn Monroe and Kim Kardashian aren't directly comparable, and treating them as such removes Marilyn Monroe's role in women's history. Kim Kardashian grew up and built her career surrounded by other wealthy socialites. Meanwhile, Marilyn Monroe grew up between an orphanage and foster homes. In her adult life, she was taken advantage of and abused by wealthy men, including having her nude photos published without her consent. But despite this, she was determined to act in movies, and she succeeded as a model and an actress. She created a persona of the blonde bombshell which everyone loved to hate. All through this, she fought against constantly being dismissed by the media and colleagues because in the 50s it was apparently impossible to be attractive and smart. When Marilyn wore this dress, it was groundbreaking. It was tightly fitted, so much so that she had to be sewn into it, and it was the same colour as her skin. A news report about Kennedy's birthday party described her entrance. Onto the stage sashayed Marilyn Monroe, attired in a great bundle of white mink. Arriving at the lectern, she turned and swept the furs from her shoulders. A slight gasp rose from the audience before it was realized that she was really wearing a skin-tight, flesh-toned gown. The dress was shocking for the time, and Marilyn was brave enough to wear it anyway. Marilyn's career, including her fashion, contributed to modern ideas about femininity and the ability to wear whatever you want. Marilyn wearing the dress back in 1962 is part of the reason why you can look at it today and say it's nothing special, because we're so used to seeing dresses like it now. I'm not sure if Kim Kardashian being chronically televised and selling questionable products that prey on people's insecurities is quite the same. And anyway, the dress was literally made for Marilyn Monroe, and therefore it doesn't suit Kim Kardashian's different body shape and skin tone at all. Fashion designer Bob Mackie, who made the first sketches of the dress, has said that it was done for her. It was designed for her. Nobody else should be seen in that dress. At the time, Marilyn requested that no one else would wear the dress after her. And so this just becomes another example of Marilyn's wishes and legacy being ignored so that other people could make some extra money using her name. So it might just be a dress. But this whole situation also highlights problems from how the most important cultural artifacts don't always end up in museums like we think they should, to wider issues about how the wealthy can mistreat heritage that should belong to everyone. The Happy Birthday dress debacle has become so concerning that the International Committee of Museums has decided to form a work group aiming to promote and protect textile preservation. They say that the media frenzy following the Met Gala highlighted the fragility of textile and clothing heritage in the face of the responsibility of museums in charge of this type of collection, and they will be updating their guidelines for caring for historical clothing. Maybe this is the silver lining of this whole situation. Now people are actually thinking about conservation, especially how difficult it is to preserve historical clothing. There is a reason we have loads of examples of ancient pottery, coins, and building foundations, but almost no examples of their clothes. Textiles degrade so quickly, and if we want today's collection of fashion history to last into the future, then we need to actually make a point of preserving it. And so maybe the treatment of the Happy Birthday dress will mean that going forward it will be less acceptable to let the rich literally walk all over important elements of our cultural heritage.
You know, sometimes your brain amazes me.
Thank you.